Lawangan perjuangan keramat Fly Kenyalang Fly, Fly High merupakan pencetus inspirasi dan aspirasi modal insan holistik ke arah pendidikan yang berkualiti bagi negeri Sarawak, bumi Kenyalang. Lawangan keramat ini berpaksikan dengan visi dan misi Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Sarawak memastikan seluruh warga pendidik negeri Sarawak berpegang pada nilai profesionalisme, integriti dan mesra. Kemenjadian murid yang berilmu pengetahuan, berkemahiran, membudayakan nilai murni serta bertanggungjawab kepada masyarakat dan negara melalui sekolah yang berkualiti merupakan matlamat pendidikan di Sarawak selari dengan Pelan Pembangunan Pendidikan Malaysia 2013-2025. Pengurusan dan pentadbiran di Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Sarawak diketuai oleh Pengarah Pendidikan Negeri dan dibantu oleh 4 orang timbalan pengarah serta 6 orang ketua penolong pengarah kanan, 3 orang ketua penolong pengarah dan 1 kaunselor negeri. Terdapat 14 sektor di Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Sarawak yang berperanan menyelaras program dan aktiviti utama bagi sektor masing-masing. Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Sarawak juga menyelaras pengurusan dan pentadbiran 30 buah pejabat pendidikan daerah di Negeri Sarawak yang diketuai Pegawai Pendidikan Daerah. Seorang Pegawai Pendidikan Daerah dilantik sebagai Yang di-Pertua Majlis PBD. Di bawah kepimpinan Pengarah Pendidikan Negeri Sarawak dengan kekuatan sebanyak 30 buah PBD, 1,458 buah sekolah, 39,509 orang guru, 458,064 orang murid dan 9,736 orang anggota pelaksana. Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Sarawak berupaya melangkah sederhana melaksanakan agenda Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia dengan iltizam ke arah menjulang pendidikan negeri Sarawak khasnya dan di Malaysia amnya melalui semangat lawangan Fly Kenyalang Fly, Fly High. Sesungguhnya rasa kepunyaan dan kebersamaan yang kukuh dan ampuh bersiap-siaga dalam menyampaikan ilmu pengetahuan serta menerapkan nilai murni merupakan prasyarat kecemerlangan pendidikan di negeri tercinta ini. Dengan gandingan mantap serta perkongsian pintar antara warga pendidik ke arah menyediakan perkhidmatan cemerlang kepada pelanggan dan pemegang taruhnya, maka Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Sarawak telah berjaya melakar beberapa kejayaan yang membanggakan bukan sahaja di peringkat kebangsaan, malah di pesada dunia antarabangsa. Revolusi Digital RE 4.0 menuntut semua institusi pendidikan supaya relevan dengan peredaran zaman. Justeru Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Sarawak bertindak bijak menggunakan arus maya untuk melaksanakan aktiviti kokurikulum sebagai pelengkap kepada kemenjadian murid. Dinamika Jabatan Pendidikan bersatu dalam satu kepunyaan demi mencapai hasrat Fly Kenyalang Fly, Fly High, menjulang pendidikan negeri Sarawak, bumi Kenyalang. Untuk keterangan lanjut, sila layari portal rasmi Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Sarawak di www.jpnsarawak.moe.gov.my.
Di sini bermula mengenal dunia bersama guru tercinta. Seronok belajar selamat sentiasa, sekolahku sejahtera. Kesihatan diutama, kebersihan dijaga, sama perkasa etika, integriti di jiwa. Kita selami empati, bina kasih insani, teguh jati diri Arab, sopan hidup harmoni. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, bangkitlah generasi pewaris negara. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, gemilanglah Malaysia di mata dunia. Sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jayakan bersama. bersama. Sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jayakan bersama. Hidup mulia berjaya, terus tekun usaha, teliti dalam bekerja, diri cekap terampil, eksplorasi ilmu berguna, bertindak rasional, mantapkan artikulasi, ucap penuh kualiti. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, bangkitlah generasi pewaris negara. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, gemilanglah Malaysia di mata dunia. Sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jayakan bersama. Sejahtera, sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jayakan bersama. Sejahtera, sejahtera, sekolah sejahtera. Di sini bermula mengenal dunia bersama guru tercinta. Seronok belajar selama sentiasa, sekolahku sejahtera. Kesehatan diutama, kebersihan dijaga, sama perkasa etika, integriti di jiwa. Kita selami empati, bina kasih insani, teguh jati diri Arab, sopan hidup harmoni. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, bangkitlah generasi pewaris negara. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, gemilanglah Malaysia di mata dunia. Sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jayakan bersama. Sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jayakan bersama. Hidup mulia berjaya, terus tekun usaha, teliti dalam bekerja, diri cekap terampil, eksplorasi ilmu berguna, bertindak rasional, mantapkan artikulasi, ucap penuh kualiti. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, bangkitlah generasi pewaris negara. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, gemilanglah Malaysia di mata dunia. Sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jagakan bersama. Sejahtera, sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jagakan bersama. Sejahtera, sejahtera, sekolah sejahtera.
Selamat petang semua rakan guru tingkatan 6 Sarawak. Salam sejahtera dan salam sekolahku sejahtera. Selamat datang ke Bengkel Kajian Tindakan bersama guru tingkatan 6 Sarawak tahun 2022, Anjuran, Unit Menengah dan Tingkatan 6, Sektor Pengurusan Sekolah, Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Sarawak. Bengkel ini diadakan dengan harapan untuk mendedahkan anda, guru tingkatan 6, kepada konsep dan metodologi bagi guru baharu berkecimpung dalam dunia kajian tindakan. Dan untuk guru yang lebih berpengalaman, pertambahan ilmu sedia ada. Sebelum kita mulakan bengkel ini, mohon rakan-rakan guru scan QR code dan isi kehadiran masing-masing. So, dengan ini, saya ingin ulang suara sekali lagi. Sebelum kita memulakan bengkel ini, mohon rakan-rakan guru scan QR code dan isi kehadiran masing-masing. Seterusnya, izinkan saya memperkenalkan penceramah kita pada petang ini. Penceramah kita pada petang ini adalah Dr. Hugh John Leong, iaitu pengarah Center of Education Research, Swinburne University of Technology, Sarawak Campus. Beliau juga adalah pensyarah kanan School of Design and Arts, juga di Swinburne, Deputy Head of School, Course Director, Program Masters in Arts, TESOL, Discipline Leader, Bachelors of Media and Communication. Hugh, are you there? Whenever you are ready.
Yes, I am here. Thank you very much. So, terima kasih kepada Dr. Jared ya untuk menjemput saya hari ini. So, izinkan saya menggunakan bahasa Inggeris ya. bahasa Malaysia saya ni sebenarnya tidak berapa bagus lah. Cukup untuk beli sayur di petani lah. So bahasa tani ni okey, tapi ini untuk bercakap untuk menjadi pencara ni susah sikit lah.
Alright, Hugh.
Okay.
So the platform is yours. Go ahead and enjoy the talk, everyone. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, Dr. Jared, and of course, welcome everybody to the session. Now, of course, as I've mentioned to you before, Malay is not one of my strongest suites, so I don't speak it very well. I hope that you'll be all right with me speaking in English. I will be checking the comments from time to time. So if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to put your questions into the comment section on Facebook or YouTube. I'll be able to have a look at it and answer your questions as we go along. So this afternoon, what we are going to do is to spend a little bit of time talking about action research, something that, well, the government now is emphasizing, right? They're thinking that it's something that is very important. And so we're going to ask this question today. Is it really important? And why should teachers be interested in doing research? Why me? Why me in Form 6 of all things? And so here I'm going to talk about the importance of doing this sort of research and why you. Yeah, so we're going to answer these questions today. So as Jared has mentioned earlier on, my name is Hugh. Please address me as Hugh. I am the director of the Center of Education Research at Swinburne, Sarawak. So what we are going to do essentially today is a couple of things. Yeah, number 3 things here. Number 1 is, of course, to describe what action research is. Some of you may be familiar with this, and you've probably seen the cycle on the right-hand side here of the image. And some of you may be already practicing it in your own classroom. Yeah. So number 2, we're going to look at the characteristics of action research. Why do we call this action research? What is this process like? And how is it different from other research? And of course, we're going to determine how different research methods can be used in action research. A lot of teachers tend to say, I have no research training before. I have no idea how to collect the evidence. How do I do research? And so I'm going to be here today to tell you that the answers are all that you already know. The evidences are what you already collect on a daily basis. And we're going to spend some time in unpacking those information. Okay, so as usual, we're going to talk about action research. What is it like? What is the process like? And we're going to share with you some tips and tricks to do action research. Yeah, I'm going to share with you sample studies, and we're going to have a little bit of a discussion and also share with you some of the resources that are available online. Okay, so when we think about action research, we must think about education research. And that is what my center at Swinburne Sarawak is actually focused on. We want to look at the inquiries of students, teachers, administrators, schools, and other educational stakeholders. Why? Education research is huge. As a result of COVID, over the last 2 years, we have seen school closures across the world. At least 6 months of school closures in most countries. And so the learning losses amongst our students is huge. Yeah, I have a lot of parents telling me that my child now is 6 years old, 7 years old, going into primary school, but they can't even speak. They can't even write. The alphabets they know is very limited. And so they're worried. They're worried for their students. They're worried for their children. And so we as teachers need to identify, what can we do? Do we do the same things, teach the same things, and expect students to be able to catch up despite having these learning losses? So that is the question that we want to explore. And so we want to, as teachers, explore how we can improve our classroom teaching and learning practice. It's very important, right? And so we want to look at the importance of how we can conduct educational research in the classroom? So, let's answer a very simple question first. What exactly is research? I don't know what research is. Apakah itu kajian tindakan? Right? And so research is just a very simple way of saying it's a systematic and rigorous inquiry of investigation. I have a problem. I need to identify the solution. But I can't just simply identify a solution that is so simple, right? I need to think about it in a more critical way. Yeah. And so we need to characterize research in a way that, number one, can be investigated. Number two, there is a process of asking those questions, gaining evidences, right? And we need to be able, from the evidence, give explanations to help people understand the nature of the problem. Many people, for example, in an English classroom, struggle with speaking. In Malaysia, a lot of students, they speak broken English, they speak with grammatically wrong sentences. How do we correct that? Or how do we actually get students to speak up in class? If it's in terms of science, it's terms of chemistry, biology, physics. I was a Form 6 student many, many years ago. And so I still remember, how did we actually learn in my time? Basically, textbook is there, memorize textbooks. That's how I managed to do very well in biology, for example, by just memorizing the thing. But fast forward, 20 years on since then, when I first studied in Form 6, if you were to ask me now, all of these theories, do I know them? Do I know how to explain them? I'm sorry to say that I don't. And so that's what we want to focus on, making sure that learning happens, that students benefit from our teaching, and they learn in the classroom, right? So in specific then, what is action research? Yeah. So action research is an approach to educational research. Think about it as a subset of education research that is used by practitioners. You yourself are interested in improving. You are interested in improving not only your teaching, which is the pedagogy, big word, but it's essentially your teaching, and of course, your practice in the classroom. Now, you may ask me the next question. Who exactly can do research? And what kind of research can I do? I'm here to tell you that everybody here can do research. Whether or not you have a diploma or a degree or a master's or a PhD, anybody can do research with the right tools, with the right practice. Yeah. So what exactly can you actually research within a classroom? Everything. Yeah. From classroom environment to classroom interactions to classroom learning to classroom theories and leadership. So many areas that we can do. Why? Because this depends on you reflecting, very important word, reflecting, and of course being critical towards yourself. Now, if you were to tell yourself, well, I'm good in everything, I can teach my students really well, they do really well, and there's nothing really that I want to improve, then action research is not for you. Action research must have an open mind. Yeah, that you're always thinking, today Adam didn't do well in class. Why? What was the reason why he didn't do well? How can I help this student of mine? And it happens on a daily basis. Yeah, a lot of us already think about it, but we don't take it beyond the thinking. Yeah, so that's what action research helps us to do. Okay. So obviously, like I've mentioned to you before, it has to be a systematic approach, right? And we want to find effective solutions to identifying ways to improve their daily lives. Obviously, we don't try to do new things for the sake of doing new things. There is always this criticism, isn't it, amongst teachers? Ayah, tahun ini polisi baru lagi. This year we must do HOTS. Next year we must do CEFR. Next year we must change the curriculum. Why? Why have to constantly change? What is the reason behind? So we must understand why these changes happen, right? And we must try to learn and embrace it. So this is where action research can be of benefit to you. Why? Because when you do your own research in your own setting, it becomes something that is for you and for your students. So your research will help you deal with specific situations and have localized solutions. Why? A lot of us, especially researchers, we like to look at textbooks, we like to do research papers, we like to see what other people have done. But sometimes you will realize, I have tried this person, wow, this person very big name, their textbook say must follow this. Saya guna di kelas saya, tidak dapat doesn't work. Why? Because again, in education, every student is different. Yeah, it's the same thing. You have different cars around you, different car brands. Same thing as well. Students are all different. Some are faster, some are a little bit slower. That doesn't matter. It's how we help them to improve their learning. Okay, so very importantly, it's you guys in your own organizations. So hopefully everybody here, you love your school, you love your community, you love to help people. And so when you have that sort of heart to improve, you improve the effectiveness of the workplace. You share your information with others. Yeah. And of course, sometimes you meet difficult situations. Why did my student not get good results? What is impacting their learning? Why don't they understand a particular concept? And so when you find out the reasons why, you develop a way to teach that they understand and they do well from this process. You're happy, they perform, they are happy, parents are happy, schools are happy, right? So continuous improvement is at the heart of what we do. Okay, so that's very important. Okay, so now we have to ask the question, when exactly should action research be conducted? Do I conduct it in the class, after the class, outside of the class? When should I actually do this? At the start of the year? The answer to this is it can be constantly conducted throughout the learning process. In the classroom, when you are planning for the class, or after the class when you're thinking about reflection and thinking about how to improve in your following class. Yeah. And so the research, it helps inform your own practice. Yeah. It helps you in reflective thinking to think about, how can I improve what I already know? For example, I am an English teacher by training. Yeah. And so I used to teach in schools as well. And so I used to always think to myself, my first posting was in a school in Kuala Lumpur many years ago. And I was in a very urban, poor school. And in this school, we had a lot of children who had fathers and mothers who were working as waiters and waitresses. We had a lot of people who were actually poor, right? Despite living in a city. And so for these people, a lot of them couldn't speak English. Their mother tongue was Mandarin. Their mother tongue was a language where they didn't use it in a formal setting in schools. So they suffered. How can we improve these people's lives? How can we use action research to identify what is missing and how can we improve that? Yep. So I want to show you this very simple action research routine. Yeah, the idea of thinking, the idea of identifying an issue, the idea of implementing a solution, right? So a very basic action research routine is what we call the look, think, and act process. Every day that you are in school, when you teach your students, you will observe, right? You will observe your students and see what's happening. For example, right now in schools, in universities, for example, we have students who are constantly getting COVID. If it's not student A today, it could be student B, it could be student C. So these people then cannot go into class on a normal fixed basis. How do we make sure that they continue to learn? So we must understand and identify this problem. If you tell me, well, no, not such issues, everything is fine in my class, then it becomes a problem. Okay. So the second step, of course, is to think, right? What is really happening here? Are they really missing classes because of COVID, or they tell you that, well, sir, I can't attend class today, I have COVID, I'm sorry, you know? And if they do, how much losses are they making in terms of their learning? How can we make sure that they can catch up? So we need to think about that process. The thinking can be when you're cooking dinner for your family. It could be when you are taking a bath. It could be while you're washing your car. It could be any point of time. And so you think about it, and of course, you try to interpret and explain. Why did this happen? How can I help? Right? And so you need to then come up with an action plan. For example, you need to write a very short, simple report. Think about the process of what had happened. How can I help these people? And so maybe in this process of my students missing class, for example, what I did was I recorded my lectures, I uploaded them to YouTube, and I said, guys, it's okay. I've broken it to small chunks. You can watch it at your own free time. Here are the exercises for the week. I have consultations for you to meet me so that we can discuss about it, right? And so that is the action process. I'm thinking about, all right, I've identified that potentially these people will not do as well because they're missing class. I've identified that these people probably need help, right? And so I provide that help, and of course, I list them down. And what you do at the very end, very importantly, is of course to evaluate. Meaning to say, we need to make sure that what we do is meaningful, right? You cannot just say, I did this new implementation. What is done? What is different about it? Don't know. I just do it because I think not enough lah. I think, yeah. The catchword many people like to say is, I think, saya rasa. That's not good enough. We need to find evidences to prove what we are saying. Okay, so for those of you who are interested in action research, yeah, we need to always constantly think. You might ask the question, oh, what research do we want to do? I don't know, Hugh. Can you tell me? Can you tell me the reason or what we can do in the classroom? That is not for me to tell, right? It's very important that in all circumstances, the teacher should be the one to identify the issues because you are with your students every day. You are in the school environment every day. But I can tell you what we could potentially look at. For example, number one, we could look at our goals and procedures. For example, what are we doing right now and how are we doing them? For example, if you're looking at new curriculum implementation or even looking at new ways of assessment, for example, implementing school-based assessment, is it necessarily better than exams? How do we know this? Does it give more pressure? Is it a better way of evaluating student performance? How can we identify these things? Or perhaps you might want to evaluate effectiveness of something that you are doing. For example, in class, if you were teaching a science class, for example, before the start of your class, I send information about, what I'm going to talk about today. For example, a class. I might have a short introduction. Students, please watch this video before you come to class. And then we have a discussion in class. Some people would like to try a flipped learning classroom, whereby the learning takes place outside of the classroom, the discussion takes place inside of the classroom. How effective is that? Are we looking at improvement in grades? Are we looking at improvement in student perception that they are enjoying their classes? Do we see more interaction with the class? So that is what we call evaluation, right? And of course, the third one is a more strategic level where we think about planning, right? We plan our activities and strategies, right? We want to try out new things. For example, I might want to do 21st century learning in my classroom. I have students working in clusters. I have a lot of activity-based learning. I have a lot of problem-based learning. I do less theory. I do more action. Does that actually engage our learners more? If I ask everybody here, do you think it engages our learners more? Do you think they learn more that way? A lot of you will definitely say in the comments, yeah, of course, it does. How do you prove that? That is the important part of action research, yeah? And so, of course, we start out by identifying the problem, which means defining the problem, right? We need to do a little bit of research as well. What have other people said in regards to this? That's where we explore the context, right? Has this research been done in Malaysia? Has this research been done in Southeast Asia? Very similar context. Has this research been done internationally? What were the findings? How did they approach the research? By looking at other people's research, we have an idea of how we can conduct ours, modify ours, and improve on their research, right? And of course, once you have an idea of how to do your research, you go out and conduct your research, identify problems and solutions, you analyze these sort of evidences. Have I found a way to help my students, for example? In certain schools, you may find that, well, a lot of teachers, they don't really interact much with one another. Therefore, they don't share as much information. But let's say you try something different and you say, instead of just talking with them on a friendly basis, having the occasional gossip, I want to talk about learning and I want to form a group of people, a community of practice to discuss about how we can engage our learners, improve our learning process, and see what they say, right? And so from that point, do we see that there's an improvement overall in teaching quality? Do students like our teaching more? Do students appreciate our teaching more? That's the process of analyzing, right? And of course, lastly, is we want to develop strategies for its resolution. Meaning you say, we either A, adopt the changes. We say, good, I've tried this out. It actually works. I'm going to now always implement this and share this with my friends, with my colleagues. Or if I decide, I think this one I could have done better. What areas could I have done better? So you rethink that process again and say, what could I have done better to improve this situation, right? And so you need to plan, you need to implement, and you need to evaluate. And that is always a cyclical process. So obviously, what we do in action research is to generate knowledge around the question, around the inquiry. Yeah, I have a question I want to answer. I want to get information. And that helps you, of course, develop yourself as a teacher. Of course, that helps the learners as well. Yeah. And so I want to encourage people to think about that process. Plan your change. What do I actually want to do? Right? And number two, of course, you need to take action. Don't just think about it and say, actually, I got this idea, but I'm too busy. I cannot, I just had too many things to do. It has to be baby steps. Doesn't need to be a big thing. Yeah, a lot of us are all worried. I have so many things already that I need to do. Hugh, are you crazy? You ask me to go and do this thing when I have so many students' assignments to mark, so many exercises to mark. I don't have time. Don't ask me. Yeah. So always think about small things that you can research on first. Once you are good at it, you always become better. I always remember the process of cooking. You know, when I used to start cooking for my family, you know, for my wife, for my children, I always think, it was such a difficult thing, you know. But as you get better at it, chopping your vegetables, washing your meats, you know, frying, cooking, steaming, blah, 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 you get better. And research is the same thing in that sense, okay? So remember to take action, observe that process, observe the changes that are being made, yeah, and of course, see what are the consequences. And as a result of that, you can't just say, students did very well. Oh, that's good. That's all we need to worry about. Thank you very much. No, constantly reflect, constantly think, wow, that's great. I'm doing this now. How can I improve? The reason is because many practices, especially educational policies, they don't last forever. Yeah. And so they will always be ketinggalan zaman. So what we need to do, of course, is constantly think about improving. So act, observe, and reflect. So this is one action research spiral. They call this a spiral because, as I mentioned to you before, it's always something that constantly is improving. It's constantly ongoing. Yeah. So of course, we need to think about it as a set of activities. You look at the problems, you think about a potential solution, you try the solution out, right? And so, of course, there are other models out there, right, that help supplement the process of action research. So here is a model from McCamis and Taggart. They say, instead of just look, think, and act, we need to, of course, at the first stage, look at it, yeah? So we have to have a planning stage, yeah? As we plan the things that we want to do, we want to act on it. After we act on it, we observe the changes. And after observing the changes, we reflect on those changes. Very similar, but of course, the terms that they use are a little bit different. What I'm trying to tell you is that doesn't matter whether you follow this spiral, or even this spiral. Yeah, there are different spirals and different terms that they use. But the idea from this, of course, all very similarly is understand the need for research, understand the need for improvement, yeah, and understand the need, of course, to ensure that you improve student learning. Okay, here is one example from AN in 2012 on teaching writing skills based on a genre approach to second language primary school students. So you can see here, of course, there has to be a structure to it. First of all, identify the aim. What do I want to do? Yeah. So in this case here, he says, I want to examine the effect of implementing a genre approach to develop writing competency of Year 5 and Year 6 second language primary school students. So you know the context. The context would be your students in a particular classroom. Yeah. And of course, what you're trying to do is identify in a particular approach. Secondly, of course, I need to think about the method. I know what I want to do, but how am I going to do it? Yeah. So there is a structure, he says, using the genre approach over a 10-week term with 2 lessons per week. So we know what he's trying to do. He's trying to do a new approach within a period of time, within a number of classes, right? And so he tells you further 2 specific genres, report and essay writing, were taught using a 3-stage teaching and learning cycle. And so That is the process of him implementing the research. And so what did he do? Remember, we always talk about assessment. We need to assess whether or not we have been successful, right? So we check again. Assessment was conducted by comparing students' writing samples before, during, and after the teaching intervention. So you see that he is gathering evidences to prove whether or not his method actually was successful. And so, of course, then at the very end, he writes the results. What is the result here? So results indicated that the teachers' active scaffolding processes benefited students by making them aware of the different ways texts are organized for different communicative purposes. Now, you don't need to write in very academic writing. Yeah, a lot of teachers will say, I'm not good at that. Doesn't matter. Can we find out conclusions or results such as this? Yeah, if you can say, I think my student did better because, don't just say think, but because. What were the reasons why? You analyze it, right? And if you can provide examples of how they did well, even better. Okay. So, what are the so-called advantages, for action research in the classroom? Again, it doesn't need to be a long research. Some research studies, if you do a master's or a PhD, some of you will know, you normally take it to 12 months, 1 year, right? A year and a half, 2 years, even longer. But for action research, it could be just 1 month. It could be just a couple of lessons. And so we can set it to a specific context or a situation. Yeah. And so, of course, the researchers themselves can be the participants. Why? Because you are in the community, whether you are with your students or you are with your colleagues. You can be part of the research. Yeah, identify how you can improve. You're part of that change process too, right? And of course, your evaluations and your modifications can be made by you. Yeah, don't worry. Some people always say, research has to be a fixed research design. When I think about my own epistemology, how I view research, I am a positivist. I must have fixed ways of doing my research. No, yeah, especially with action research, when we are in the classroom, if we're doing something and we say, hey, doesn't really work, I want to try another way. Go ahead. Yeah, it is flexible for you because you are the owner, you are the boss of the school classroom that you are teaching in. Okay. And so you can also develop your own theory from the research rather than follow a previously formulated theory. It's very interesting, we did a research a couple of years ago in terms of student engagement. Why do students actually decide to study in a particular university, right? And so when you look at education, for example, many people have this perception, I want to go to this university, or parents especially say, I want to send children to this university because quality education. I look at their university ranking. I look at the programs they're offering. I want to see which university is best for my child. That's what normally people think. But very interestingly, when we did the research a number of years ago, and we asked 600 over students, why did you study in UCSI, in UNIMAS, in Swinburne, and in other universities? It was very interesting. A lot of them said, it's because the university looks nice. The facilities looks beautiful. My friends are going to this university, so therefore I follow, right? And it's not something that we commonly thought about. And that's the same thing with action research. It might be in your case that you find out that, well, students learn better when they are in groups. Students learn better when it is using project-based learning. So you never try, you never know, right? And of course, your study can lead to open-ended outcomes, meaning to say that even more questions come. That's good for you, right? It's normal to do research and have more questions rather than answers. Why? Because there's so many more things that we can explore. And of course, you can tell the story. You can tell how you have improved your students' lives. You can help tell how you can improve the school environment and the teaching and learning process. Now, of course, you may say, Hugh, come on. Can't be that that's the best thing that we can do, action research, yeah? Of course, there are different ways, and of course, there are drawbacks to doing action research. Yeah? It has some limitations, and of course, people are critical about it, especially scientists, yeah? Because it's always the issue of, can we measure accurately our research? Can we really show improvement? Yeah? And so that's why we need to remember the structure. We need to make sure that we have validity when we do our research. Now, how can we improve our validity then? Yeah, of course, number one is to do our own homework. Read what other people have done before. How did they conduct their action research? And if it's good, can I implement it in my context? It's not plagiarism, don't worry. Yeah? You are looking at other people's ideas and of course trying it out for your own classroom. And it's there for everybody to use and learn from. Okay, so you'll see what other people do, see what you can do on your own, and of course try to improve on that process. Number two, of course, is when you're looking at what other people do, try it out yourselves. Why not? If people are using an observation schedule, for example, a table to look at observations, and they say it's effective for them, try it out. Yeah. And if it's not good enough, no problem. We use a different method. So we think about it, right? Now, we of course need to think about how we can look at the problem. Yeah. So try to focus a small group of people. Small group, maybe half of your class, maybe a couple of people in your class. That's okay, right? So we can see how we can improve them. Or if you want to look at your class in general, that's fine as well. But the important thing is, if you have too many students, don't focus on all of them. Focus on the thing that you need to improve themselves. Okay. So now we need to think about planning the action research process. So I'm going to talk more about practical things rather than the theory. So the theory is there. I'm selling you action research. You already know that. So how are we going to really do action research now? Yeah. So who can do it? And can we do it alone? Can we do it with other people? The answer is yes. Yeah. You can work on it yourself individually in class. No problem. You can conduct your own research project in your own classroom. Or you may want to work with your other teachers who are teaching the same subjects with you in the same school or within a school district. For example, your PPDs, right? So whether it's in Kuching or Samarahan or wherever else it may be, right? Then you can worry about, let's talk about how can we improve these areas and this community. Or it can be the whole school. Again, as long as you are willing to do it, you have the time to do it, you can try to, of course, help the school. And that's very, very important as well. All right? So, obviously, when we do action research, we are going to talk to a lot of people. And the talking a lot of people is very good because you collaborate with people across disciplines, across different years of study. You have constant discussion about instructional issues and student learning. Yeah. More often than not, we are not the smartest person in the room. I always tell people, I don't think I am smart at all. I don't think I am the most learned person. A lot of people have read different things. We are all interested in different things. So what is important here? We share and we learn with each another, right? And so what we can see here is, of course, through literature, action research has helped to improve performance of students. Yeah. And when we review practice, we see what has been done, we come up with even better practices. And because you do it yourself, you are more motivated because this is my baby, right? This is my research study. I am responsible for it. And who knows, right? You may be interested in doing action research for your own master's or for your PhD. Nothing wrong with that. And we can see how this can improve, your students, at the same time earn you a degree. Nothing wrong with that either, right? And of course, we help contribute to professional knowledge about teaching and learning. Maybe in the next CELES, for example, you want to present, to the ministry. Maybe in the next, forums from the Ministry of Education, you can go and join. Maybe in the next MELTA conference, you can share your information there as well. The possibilities are endless. Yeah. So as I've mentioned to you before, this is a very, very simple table, right? We want to think about our action research process. We want to reflect, we want to plan, we want to act, we want to observe. So for example, here, if I give you the question, to what extent does flipped classroom help low proficiency ESL learners in their report writing? Yeah, you might now think about it. I've got to think, how can I help with a flipped classroom learning? So maybe we try out. I need to understand first of all, what is flipped classroom? Apa itu flipped classroom? So you go online, you do a little bit of research. You say, this is how they do it. And so you might want to try and say, how much time am I going to spend trying out this research? So you come up with a planning stage already. You say that, my students right now, when every time I ask them to do report writing, it's always when I ask them to do homework, correct? We always ask our students when you do writing, essay writing, for example, okay, class, please, we go back and write, and then after that, submit back to me, okay? So that's normally what we tell students. And so when they come back, sometimes no submission. Sometimes their dog ate their homework. Sometimes their grandmother died. I had one student who used this example of their grandmother died twice in a semester. So I asked him, how many of your grandmothers have died? So anyways, be that as it may, right? In this kind of situations, we need to think, what is the plan? How long do I need to implement the plan for, right? And then we try it out. Right, we try it out, we have a game plan, and then we observe. Do students actually improve in their report writing? For example, if they write in class and they collaborate with one another, they look at other people, how you write, macam mana, ikut yours good, I also follow, right? Or, for example, if they can collaborate together, write a report together, 3-4 people in a group, do they learn, this is how you do the title, this is the structure, we need to do this, point 1, point 2, point 3. So when they learn in that way, they get better because they learn together and they don't forget about it, right? So potentially that could be one way of doing so. So let's talk about the practical things now, right? The practical things. A lot of you now be thinking, okay, Hugh, that's fine. You've talked about the theory long enough already. You've talked about the process already. You've talked about the structure already. I want to know now, if I am to do an action research tomorrow, how am I going to do it? Okay, so this is where I'm going to help you with this. Number one, when we're thinking about a study, remember, think about the question. What do I want to ask? How can I answer it? So first things first, avoid questions that can be answered with yes or no, right? Do students like my class? Yes. Do students not like my class? No, right? So again, why, right? You need to ask, how can I improve my classroom learning? And so, of course, very importantly is avoid questions to which you already know the answer. If you know the answer to your problems already, you don't need to prove it, right? you can already immediately act on improving it. So, very important, try first of all to write a draft, right? Think about a couple of questions. What are the problems that I face? What I like to do when I identify in my class, right, is I write down all the problems that I face in class. I teach in the master's program in Swinburne University. And so in my class, I have so many different kinds of students. I have students who are fresh graduates immediately jumping into their masters. I have teachers who have many years of experience. I have a student who is visually impaired. She cannot see. She's completely blind. I have students from China, from South Korea, who have very basic levels of English. I have so many different kinds of students. And so obviously in those kinds of classes, you get students who are very fast, you have students who are very slow, you have students who are unhappy with the learning process. So again, I write down all the problems there. And then of course, you could share it with a colleague because you want to know, hey, this problem, is it just me? Am I the problem? Right? Or are other teachers having these problems as well? And you never know. They could give you very good feedback. They say, hey, actually, I also have this problem, but this is how I solved it. So you don't need to actually do very specific research. You can try that new plan out, right? Or they can say, I think this question, maybe we change it a little bit. Yeah. So grow it a little, make it more researchable. And I give you these two example research questions down below here. Yeah. Say, for example, you have a class. Yeah, your class, you have certain classes, especially in primary schools, where the children in the class, are so mean and nasty to each other. They shout at each other, they beat each other, they pull students' hair. I have a friend, who had one student, very interestingly. This happened before MCO. The student didn't like the teacher. And so what he did was, in class, he took off his shoes, took off his socks, and he threw the sock at the teacher, right? And so you might want to ask this question, okay, do I get angry? Do I shout at the student and I say, oi, why are you doing this, huh? Or we need to think about, why is this student like that? Why is he unhappy with my class? Why is he not liking my class? How can I improve my class? How can I make it more engaging and fun so that everybody can enjoy my class? So going back to this example over here, rather than saying, why are some of my kids so mean and nasty? Meaning you say, I identify the problem, but I'm not looking at the solution. We need to always think about, how can I improve the class? So a better question could be, how can I help pupils in my class develop a respectful classroom community? So you see, instead of saying, I want to know what the problem is only, I'm also thinking about the solution, okay? So when we look at good research questions, here are some examples that I can provide to you. One, what happens when students participate in the process of providing evidence of their understanding? Yeah? When I ask students to share, do they actually learn? Do they want to participate? It's very interesting. You know why? Because in most cases in schools, if you can see schools, a lot of teachers, they just go on and talk, just like how I'm doing this workshop right now. Yeah, but because of course we are live streaming it, yeah, it's very difficult for us to have very meaningful interactions and discussions. But if you're in a classroom, take advantage of that, right? Think about, if I actually got my students to talk, speak up, or in other ways, try to get them to write comments, you will see that, well, students could potentially do well, all right? So what I also realized, I once taught in China before, and I was teaching a group of teachers in China. And so at the very end of the training, I talked to them and I said, all right, anybody would be willing to share about their experiences? What did they learn throughout this process? What was the most beneficial takeaway, right? Nobody actually put up their hands. So I thought to myself, oh no, it must be that I'm actually very bad at teaching. You know, they probably hate my teaching. So what I did was, I said, it's okay, no worries, we take a break. So I quickly took pieces of paper out, and I tore pieces of paper and I said, we are going to randomly read out people's comments, and it's going to be anonymous. You can write whatever you want, express yourself. And so what I did was I gave it all to all these teachers, and they wrote all this information together. And I said, we are going to break our classes into small groups. And in those small groups, I'm going to give you out in random these notes, and you're going to read out these notes. And I want you to discuss, did you have that same experience? And very interestingly, instead of now everybody sitting down and not talking, everybody started talking. Everybody started sharing their experiences. So that's what we want to do. Think about ways to improve the way in which we do things. Number 2, what can I learn about the challenges facing teachers and schools by examining my daily use of time outside of the classroom? You may think about it from your own perspective. What do you do in your own free time? A lot of teachers will say, hey, I'm very busy lah, RPH saya belum habis ah. And so what do? They copy their RPH from somewhere else, right? And so you might want to think, apart from doing my RPH, what else can I do? I understand. You don't get angry at me. I also have children. I also have a working wife. So in this process, of course, it's very hard for us to juggle between work and, of course, our own family. But think about it. When you have free time, how can I incorporate new things to my classroom? And so that could be something that you want to do on your own, self-reflection, right? And you might say, let me plan my time out. When I get back from work, maybe it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or even 3 o'clock. My wife, who is a primary school teacher, she gets off work around 3 o'clock every day. She reaches home by 3:30. And so perhaps we can think about, what do we want to do? How can we compartmentalize our time? For example, okay, from 4 to 5 o'clock, I'm going to take a nap right now. From 5 to 6 o'clock, I'm going to think about what I'm going to cook for dinner. I'm going to start cooking, of course. I'm going to feed the baby, right? And then from 7 to 9, what can I do? Do I want to do my students' marking? Do I want to think about what activities I'm going to do for the next day? So think about that and say, if I structured my time a little bit better, does it help me become a more efficient teacher? Maybe something to think about, right? Or lastly here, what are some instructional strategies and questioning techniques that I can employ to increase student comprehension and higher order thinking capabilities? Now, this is something that one of my master's students actually is researching on right now. So she says in her primary school class, in a rural school, she's actually in Subis. She says that the students, they don't actually want to ask any questions. So when you ask them, students, do you have any questions? They're like, no, tidak ada. All right. And so what happens is that, of course, in the exam, they are higher order thinking skills, right? And of course, these students, they don't get to really practice because they don't ask questions, they don't think. And so she's thinking about, how do I encourage them to think, right? Is it my way of asking questions? Is it the problem of my activities? And so we think about the instructional strategies, the way I teach in my class. We think about the questioning techniques instead of, did you, do you, have you? And the answers will be yes or no. You ask the students, what can we do? Or we give them an activity and do it together, right? It could potentially be that way. So now you've got your question already. Now you're thinking about your question and you say, great, I have my question. What am I going to do next? How am I going to answer this question? And a lot of people tell me, well, God, I don't know anything about research. I don't know what is research method. Apa itu methodology? Apa itu method? Saya tidak tahu, saya tidak faham. So, 2 questions I'm going to ask you right now. Number 1, what evidences do you need to answer your question? And what do you already do every day? What tools do you use that will help you answer that question? My answer to this is that they are right at your fingertips. You can get them easily, right? I'm giving you this couple of examples here. Number 1, classroom maps. A map of the classroom is like a map of the world. You identify in your class who are the ones doing well, who are the ones who need help, who are the ones that you focus on. You can draw a very simple map and identify. And so you identify places that you should be going more often to, providing more advice. That's where you can collect your data, right? Your map helps you to identify problem areas in your classroom. Number 2, of course, is to have anecdotal records. In the past, of course, everybody would have to write it all down in a diary somewhere. Now, no problem, right? You can use your phones wherever you go, wherever you are going to, you can see how to improve. I remember teaching a bunch of teachers before in a program for JPNS a couple of years ago. And I realized that a lot of English teachers in Sarawak, what had happened was that they don't use the language itself outside of the classroom. And so when I asked them, to run activities in English, they didn't do very well. So I took note of that. What areas were they not doing well? So as I was conversing with them, I wrote down notes. For example, I may say, speaking probably not so bad, but maybe in terms of writing, how do I improve that? So always write these down, these observations down, right? And of course, you can have time sample observations, which is very similar to anecdotal records. The difference is that you observe people for a period of time. Very simple example over here. You want to see, in a period of 5 or 10 minutes, how many of your students actually stand up and walk around, for example? How many of them are trying to pass notes or message each other or just whisper around or are playing around, right? And so that actually helps. When you're looking at these observations, it helps you identify who are your problem people in your class, right? And not just, I think that person very bad. I think this student of mine always very naughty, always running around. What is always? How often is always? And so based on those actions, you may identify, does this student have ADHD, for example? Does this student have learning difficulties? Does this student need more support, right? So you can identify that. Of course, you can use samples of student, work as well. Sample of student work is something that you get often. Identify how or what areas of improvement they need to do. Especially when I'm a language teacher, so my examples will be more language-based. When you're looking at student work, especially for essays, you will realize that, we follow a rubric. So we will look at grammar, cohesion, content. What areas do students need to improve on? So you identify those errors. The same thing I know a lot of you will do, error analysis for exams. Exams, you will always do error analysis. Okay, question 1, berapa orang dapat betul, berapa orang dapat salah, apakah jawapan yang betul, berapa peratus pelajar yang dapat soalan A ni betul, and things like that, right? So you will have that. So when you take those analysis, you look at, what are the contents that I need to provide more revision for? That's action research, right? Drawings and photographs are also very important to explain students' emotion. I know you were saying, hey, Form 6 no art class, Hugh, what are you talking about? Doesn't matter. when it comes to a language classroom, share that experience. When you're talking about pengajian for example, you can share that experience. You can ask students to write or even take photographs. One actually very powerful story that I can share with you. We were talking about the issues of family. I used to teach when I was doing my PhD. I used to teach in a school as well in the UK. And so that experience actually was a very sad experience, but I learned something very powerful from that. I went to a school where we had a lot of refugees from war-torn countries. Refugees from war-torn countries. Now, at the time, there was a student from an Eastern European country, much the same like how Ukraine and Russia is having war right now, and you have refugees. And so in the class, I remembered I was teaching the students, primary school, very young children. I was talking about family. So I said, all right, children, I would like you to draw your family. I'd like you to draw your family tree. I'd like you to draw your parents, your father, your mother, if it's possible, right? So everybody was happily drawing. Everybody was taking their crayons, their color pencils, and they were drawing. Now, as I was walking around, I went to this one student who was a refugee, and I looked at his drawing. His drawing was all red in color, right? All red in color. I saw rockets, I saw fires, and I saw their parents' pictures lying down with X's in their eyes. And I asked, I said, what does this actually represent? And of course, at that point of time, I was a very, very young, boy at the time. I would say I was very immature. So I asked this, and she says, well, my parents are all dead now, And so that's where I got to learn that this student had a lot of emotional pain, a lot of emotional suffering. So the drawing helped me to understand them a bit more, to get to know these people, right? And so I provided more attention, more care, more love for this particular student because I knew he needed it, right? Of course, we can use other methods, which are the more common methods, such as the interviews and conversations. I like to have focus groups, meaning to say group interviews with students. Why? It's because when you have one-to-one interviews with your students, especially when they are your student, and you interview them in, let's say, for example, in the classroom, or even in the teacher's room, or even in a meeting room, you will find that they don't want to share a lot of things with you because they think of you like their annoying parent. Why you ask me this question? I don't want to answer you lah. Why am I here? Teacher, I don't want to be like that, right? So again, we can think about it and we can say, let's do a focus group instead. Let everybody in a group share. And so when one person starts talking, other people will start talking. And I like that, because it helps create a friendly mood. You can also give short surveys. Universities do this all the time, constantly giving out surveys for students. Did the teacher did well? Did the teacher teach well? Did the teacher explain things well? Was the content good? How can we improve this? So we always have surveys to talk about constant improvement. And of course, lastly, we can of course have our own research journals. For those of you who are more advanced in research, you can maintain a research journal. There's a very good question earlier on here that asks, how would the format of our action research report be like? I'll give you an example in a while, okay? And so now that we have already, collected our data, we need to obviously analyze our data. So very importantly, read your data, understand your data, and summarize your data. At the end of the day, when we are doing reports, your school principal, your PPDs, your JPNSs, whatever it is, they will not have a lot of time to go through all of this information. So you need to make sure your information is clear and is meaningful. we are very, very interested in data visualization, right? If you can provide charts, tables, or graphic organizers to help you, whether it's a smart art in Word, do it, because it helps you express your information in an easy to understand manner. Yeah, and always be sure to analyze your data. Don't just show the data. Nah, bagi you lah, you sendiri tengok lah, right? Explain what are we seeing here. Okay, and so very lastly here, we need to report the results of our actions, right? Of course, describe what were the things that you do. Yeah, sell your story. Very important, right? Reflect on the evidence that you have collected. Wow, I have seen some students performing well. Some do very, very well here. Some do very well there. Some people don't do well at all. Why? So you count, identify how many students actually did well, how many didn't do well. Look for the patterns. There are always going to be patterns out there. Yeah, and so you want to share that evidences with colleagues. Yeah, Perkongsian bersama, every afternoon. In most schools, it's Wednesday afternoons. Some of them have it on Thursday, some of it on Fridays. Share the information with your colleagues. See if they have that same experience. Yeah. Of course, you are not going to manage to convert everybody, right? But at least you try. Yeah. And of course, here now we need to examine what are the different explanations that could contribute to the data. There are always going to be multiple reasons why certain things happen. Yeah, so we need to identify all of those reasons. Okay, think about the children, think about the learning situation, and you say, what is my argument? What is my inference that I can make from this? What can I say about the things that I have done? And based on that, of course, you then think about, what am I going to do with this information now? The answer is always use it to improve your practice. Yeah. Think about the needs for your students. Think about the changes that you can make. Think about the results. Yeah. Does the evidence that you have produced support your claim? You cannot shock sendiri. Yeah. Just say, I think. Yeah. Do your colleagues believe your findings? Do they agree with you? Even if not, why not? Yeah. Ask. If you're looking at research to all people, right? How are we going to improve? What is unique about our setting? And will others find our research, our findings useful? And so if you see a problem, you try to solve a problem, you identify more problems to solve, or you improve on the existing one, right? And so Albert Einstein's comment, is a very simple one. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Often we say, this year our student batch better. Last year the student batch are not so good. I think this year our student result will be improving. No, right? We have to also look, even if this year's isn't as good, even if we have certain students who are not as good, what can we do to improve it? And rather than just blame, too bad lah, it is what it is, tidak apa, terpaksa lah, so we cannot do that. So I go back to the question earlier on. What is a good sample AR study? Okay. Number one, of course, we start out by providing a short context. Why do we want to do this research? So this is a sample from David Noonan, very, very, big person in the area of research. So Noonan says in his project, small scale action research project, involving several groups of first-year undergraduate liberal arts students at the University of Hong Kong. So you have the research site. You have your sample. These are the people that you are going to look at. Yeah. And so you then provide the objective. The central purpose of the strategy training was to experiment ways of making the students more active participants in their language learning. So this is your objective. So how are you going to measure? How are you going to obtain evidence? So through providing learners with systematic opportunities to focus on the processes underlying their language learning and patterns of language use. So that is what you are going to do in terms of collecting data, collecting evidences. Yes. And lastly, of course, here is, why do I want to do this? Yeah. Why do I actually want them to talk more? Why do I want them to participate? What is important from this? Yeah. Of course, you want to achieve greater sensitivity to their language acquisition and be in a better position to control their subsequent English language development. Basically, what it means, I want them to improve in their language, and I want them to take ownership of this. And so I have research questions. You may have 1, 2, 3, 4, but typically, don't worry. Try with 1 first. Start small. So in this case here, 4, I just read out the first one. Would learner strategy training lead to greater sensitivity in the language learning process? So you can see that these are all questions that go with what, would, to what extent, yeah? Because we don't want to have yes and no answers. We want to be able to explain this process. Okay, the second part here is to then explain the procedures in more detail. It doesn't need to be long. It could be a short paragraph or 2. For example, in this case here, starts out by talking about the timeline, right? So at the beginning of the semester, I introduce students to the aim of the project. And then you can see right at the very end, at the end of the first week, guided journals were filled out by participating in the project. They contain the following sentence starters, which students were asked to complete, right? So here is the table that is provided in terms of what he got their students to write about. And so you can see at the beginning of the course and at the end of the course, yeah, you can see that students were more articulative. They actually explain things more. And so when you produce evidences like this, very easy to see. You know why? I don't even need to read the sentence. I can look by the length of the sentences themselves. They are so much longer on the right-hand side. This means that students are expressing themselves better. That is the goal and the aim of this research, right? And so, of course, at the very end, you need to have a conclusion. And so I always show this thing here because it's important, because we need to identify 3 things. Our teaching and learning, number 1, our implication for our learners, and of course, to our theory. Now, if you are not confident in building theory, no problem. But very important, how can we improve our teaching and learning? And how can we help our learners? So your conclusion should include that. I'm going to read out certain sections here, right? So number 1, strategy training provided opportunities for learners to reflect on the learning process. That is the implication for pedagogy. It helped, right? It helped learners in their learning process. Now, the opportunities, what did they do? It helped learners to identify and articulate differences between their school experiences and those encountered in university. So beneficial for learners, again, differentiate their experiences. So we can see that benefit. And so in theory is where you compare what has been written in the literature, right? Compare what has been written in the journal articles, in books, and what you are doing here. So it supported the idea that language classrooms should have a dual focus, not only in teaching language, but also developing learning processes. Yeah. So in this, you can see 3 good outcomes that we can show to our teachers, our fellow colleagues, to our principals, even to the government. So here are some resources from Action Research that you can go and Google. Some of these are available but some of these you might need to purchase. Yeah, but these are all very good books which will help you in giving you a head start. Yeah, and for those who are interested, you can also email me for more resources. I am happy to share if you like. Yeah, I've provided you my email at the end. Okay, so that basically wraps up my session. But before I move on to the question and answer session, I just want to do a little bit of sharing of our programs that we have in Swinburne. So hopefully you allow me to do so, yeah, in a very short period of time. Basically, for our master's programs, we offer master's by research and, of course, master's by coursework. So currently, master's by coursework, we provide the Masters of Arts, teaching English to speakers of other languages. So some of you may be worried and say, Hugh, I'm not interested in doing a master's. I don't know whether I'm good enough for it. So we provide a graduate certificate of TESOL. We have a graduate diploma of TESOL. We also have a Masters of TESOL program. So these are all available on our Swinburne website. And of course, our entry requirements are very standard. As long as you've completed an undergraduate degree in English, you are more than welcome to join us. Yeah, and of course, if you are a Sarawak Teachers Union member, we also provide a 20% bursary discount for you to study over here. And who knows, you might have a background in English as well. You might also be able to finish this program within 1.5 years instead of a typical 2-year program. So what I want to emphasize here, of course, is our Swinburne advantage. Yeah. When it comes to masters in a classroom, the first thing is, of course, we have very experienced academics. All of our lecturers are trained from Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. Yeah, and I don't mean to say that Malaysian universities are not good. Yeah, what I'm trying to tell you here is, of course, in terms of our trainings, we have extensive training internationally. Yeah, so we have that experience worldwide. And of course, secondly, is flexible learning. Yeah, our learning processes are both online and face-to-face. So of course, you get some of these that you're doing here right now, but of course, you also have the face-to-face learning. Right now, our university is undergoing a 20 million ringgit renovation. So when you come to Swinburne, I'm happy to show you the place. I'm happy to show you what developments we have and how we actually engage our learners in their learning process. Importantly, of course, you're going to be worried, if I get this degree, can I go to overseas to work? Is it going to be recognized by the government? The answer is yes. We are compliant to the Australian qualifications framework. We are also accredited by the Malaysian Qualifications Register. So don't worry, yeah, wherever you go, this is recognized. So we also have a very diverse classroom. Currently, right now, off the top of my head, we have students from Indonesia, Egypt, China, Japan, Indonesia, and Malaysia and Singapore. So quite a number of different places around, and so that also helps you in also getting to know different people from different backgrounds. The youngest student that we have right now in this program, 24 years old, and the oldest student that we have in our program is 62 years old. Yeah, so I always tell people, never too young, never too old. Yeah, so always happy to see people coming to study. And of course, after this, if you've done a master's, you're interested to do a PhD, you can jump straight away to do a PhD with us as well. So the next one I wanted to share with you also is our degrees by research. We provide 2 degrees, a Master's of Research, and of course, a PhD program. Now, this is something interesting that I want to share with all of you. Why? Is because we have very big discounts just for teachers in Sarawak. Yeah, and so we provide teaching and training, audiovisual techniques, languages, history, sociology, business, a whole wide area for our masters. Same thing for our PhD programs. Now, the requirements are here, but what I want to emphasize first of all is STU members, we are providing 90% fee waiver for your studies in a master's and for your PhD. If you look at the prices that we have right now, this is our average price, 25,900 for our Masters in Research per year. And so if you study for 2 years, that's about 50,000 ringgit. And so if you have 50,000 ringgit and 90% off, you're only paying 10,000 ringgit for a master's. It's as competitive as going to a local university. But the difference is our degrees are all from Australia and accredited by Australia, right? Same thing with our PhD, 28,380 ringgit per year. If you times this by 4 years, you're looking at 120,000 ringgit. So pretty expensive, but with 90% bursaries, you're only going to pay only 10% of that, which is around 12,000 ringgit. So in this, you will be able to get a very good high quality education for a fraction of the price. So if you'd like to know more, and if you'd like to ask for more resources from me or ask me questions in regards to action research, you can of course reach me at hjleong@swinburne.edu.my. And for more information about our programs, please of course visit our website at swinburne.edu.my /courses/masters and Doctor of Philosophy. So I hope that this session has helped all of you understand a bit of action research, and I'm now open to having any questions if you may. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Hugh, for the rather enlightening and, dare I say, very engaging 1.5 hours of you presenting about the action research. And there are a few points of interest. I think you have already answered Dr. Ng's question about the format, right? The format of the AR report by David Noonan. I think that's the standard. And a few points of interest, one of which is that you were a former Form 6 student yourself. Would you like, and you can choose not to reveal, but would you like to tell us which school? Is it in Sarawak?
Yes, it was in Sarawak. In fact, it was SMK Green Road. So shout out to those of you from SMK Green Road before this. But
SMK Green Road, yeah.
Yeah. But very interestingly, when I was in Form 6, at the time, STPM was very fixed. You had very fixed curriculums, you had very fixed sort of questions, and every year, a lot of people were worried about spotting answers, And so I felt that those type of learnings wasn't very beneficial because you ended up really having a lot of teaching to the test, a lot of rote memorization of learning, and that isn't beneficial, right? We want to see how students can actually internalize, conceptualize, and of course be able to understand what they are learning rather than just blindly learning and saying, okay, I memorized this just to go to university. So I think that's not very beneficial.
So having both your feet in both worlds, as in you were in Form 6 and now you are a lecturer at a university. Do you see that connective tissue between what the sort of skill set a Form 6 student should have before entering, say, a university that you think is important and that should be cultivated at Form 6 level? Which sort of skills do you think teachers can focus on? Dr. Hugh.
Right. Thank you. I think that's a very interesting question. I think very importantly, of course, is critical thinking. That's the most important thing that I always emphasize with my students. I realize a lot of students that transition on from Form 6 to degree, they are not as active as their foundation counterparts. And that is actually because in foundation, a lot of our classes are very similar to the degree classes in that we encourage a lot of group work, we encourage a lot of discussions, we encourage a lot of assignment-based, learning. And so for our teachers in schools, if it's something that you're able to do, always think about how can you encourage your learners to think. rather than just memorizing, rather than just doing exercises, and rather than just watching YouTube or watching you talk about things and looking at the slides, always try to get them to try it out. And I remember this very clearly. You know, there was a point in time, and I remember this in our chemistry class. And the teacher at the time said, we don't have enough materials for the class. So for the practical, I am going to show you. Yeah, I'm going to show you the experiment. So I want everybody to gather in front of class, and I'm going to show you the experiment of what I'm going to do, and I'm going to give you a short explanation. I remembered very clearly that after the experiment itself, I looked at my friend and I said, I have no idea what she has done. And so that's something that I want everybody to at least try out, you know, get everybody to try, you know. Doing is actually so much better than just seeing it. And so in that process, of course, I hope that, you know, teachers will provide opportunities for students to discuss, interact, and allow some noise. A lot of teachers are also very worried of noise. You know, they're worried that, oh, pengetua going to come, walk past, oh, kenapa your class ni, bising gila. No? So again, allow people to interact, discuss, and of course, make it meaningful. Yeah, and that's my experience.
I think you have shared with us your wealth of experience, your treasure trove of experience, all the way to China. I mean, your experience in with the teacher trainees. Were there teacher trainees in China? And
yes.
And the cultural difference, even stark difference between here and there, right? Stark difference between the Malaysian style. We thought we used to think we used to group Asians together collectively, right? I think that's the very binary way of looking at things. When you were in the UK, was everything grouped like that? Collective the Asian or the Eastern philosophy of learning versus the Western philosophy of learning? Or was it like that?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. When I was in China teaching these students, very interestingly is that they were very, very willing to learn. And a lot of us actually in Malaysia, we tend to complain and say our workload is actually very bad and we are very lowly paid, you know. In China, in fact, for an English teacher, their average salary is about 3,000 to 3,500 ringgit a month. And in terms of their teaching, a lot of us here have about 20 over odd periods, about 25 periods or so. But in China, they teach almost 35 to 40 periods. That is a very normal time, you know, that they do. And in fact, a lot of them actually say that it's a very much a luxury, you know, to teach in Malaysia with the hours that we have. So very comparatively, they are more stressful, you know. So I always think that for us, it's something that we can, of course, take advantage of, you know, our time that we have outside of the class. Yes, spend time with your family, spend time watching Netflix and watching Astro, but of course, always think about your own professional development. I think that's very important. If you ask me about the comparison between our Asian style and in the UK, I still remember when I was studying there and I went to see my supervisor, you know, he'd ask me, so Hugh, what have you read today? And he just looked at me and he'll just stare and wait for me. And I'll start talking about what I've read, you know. And then he says, all right, that's good. I think you need to read more. And I asked him, okay, what exactly do I need to read? You know, so he'll give me a couple of pointers, what areas, but it's never specific. He'll never say, please read this book. I need you to read this book. Or please look at this line of inquiry. It's very much more open. So encourage your students to have that sense of inquisitiveness. I have a problem. I want to look at how I can improve the problem. Same with everybody here. I don't want to give everybody the fish, right? I teach you how to fish. You know, I know that old adage is ketinggalan zaman. People are so cliche, I know lah. But it's actually true. Yeah, when you actually appreciate that learning process yourself, it will be so much more powerful.
Right. I think that is very insightful. I mean, for many, because I think being in the middle of the duties, we tend to forget sometimes that our lot is not as bad as others. For instance, when you mentioned that the mainland Chinese teachers are actually teaching upwards of 40 periods, right, per day, or 40 periods per week. So the final question here is, with regards to action research, is very quickly and do you have a very quick action research with regards to improving critical thinking among students in Form 6? Yeah, a very quick one.
Right. Normally what I like to do is thinking about critical thinking using examples. I like to use examples from the Harvard Business Review. Yeah, especially this is something that you can do in Pengajian for example, right? If you read the Harvard Business Reviews, they have a lot of case studies. And I always like to give some case studies. If you'd like some examples, please email me. I'm happy to share those examples with you as well. Looking at, for example, the environment. How would we be able to look at different perspectives of people? For example, if I wanted to implement green policies within my workplace, how would I be able to do so? Who do I need to think about in this process? And so once you get people to think about different perspectives, you get them to think critically. Once you get them to think about alternatives, you get them to think critically. It's the same when we teach math, for example. Yeah, we always say there's a fixed way of doing math, but in fact, there are multiple ways to get that answer. Some people don't even realize, hey, how did I get that answer? But I didn't follow the steps, right? So we get people to think about it. And if we are able to get people to think about alternatives, to think about how they can improve, then we have done and we have helped critical thinking.
So in summary, the 4 W's and one H applies when one is trying to build or design an action research around critical thinking. I think you have pointed out or highlighted something that is important, which is that teachers already have the tools. The only thing stopping teachers, or at least the new teachers, with regard to action research is really the first step. And yeah, I think as a reminder to everyone, you have a 90% waiver if you are an STU member, right, Hugh?
Yes, that's right.
Only if you're an STU member, you get a 90% waiver as a master's in a research master's, right? In TESOL,
yes,
as well as a PhD. And the PhD, 90% waiver. You don't find this anywhere else. You really don't find this anywhere else. And it's an Australian degree, not to besmirch local universities. I got my PhD locally, as did you. But this is a great opportunity for teachers who would like to improve yourself, especially when you're at Form 6. And these are pre-U. And definitely a master's or a PhD could help. So thank you, Hugh, for spending time with us and sharing with us all these fireside stories. Because we usually hear from government or governmental bodies like the IPGs and maktabs and all that. It's interesting and fascinating to hear stories from outside that comfort zone. And to all Form 6 teachers, and Hugh is not only a former Form 6 student, his wife works for KPM as well. So that's why he knows all these terms. So I will consider you one of us, and because you are very cognizant and you do know a lot about the system. And yeah, so the question is only for TESOL programs, the waiver, or is it for everything else?
For a master's in research and for a PhD, it's open to all categories. Yeah.
All categories. All right.
Yeah, all categories.
Sociology, all these things, if they're interested.
Yes.
All right. So with that, thank you, Hugh. Hope we will have you online again or in person in the future for more sharing. So thank you and goodbye.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Di sini bermula mengenal dunia bersama guru tercinta. Seronok belajar selama sentiasa, sekolahku sejahtera. Kesihatan diutama, kebersihan dijaga, sama perkasa etika, integriti di jiwa. Kita selami empati, bina kasih insani, teguh jati diri Arab, sopan hidup harmoni. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, bangkitlah generasi pewaris negara. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, gemilanglah Malaysia di mata dunia. Sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jaga bersama. Sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jaga bersama. Hidup mulia berjaya, terus tekun usaha, teliti dalam bekerja, diri cekap terampil, eksplorasi ilmu berguna, bertindak rasional, mantapkan artikulasi, ujar penuh kualiti. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, bangkitlah generasi pewaris negara. Sekolahku sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, gemilanglah Malaysia di mata dunia. Sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jaga bersama. Sejahtera, sejahtera, sekolahku sejahtera, ayo kita jaga